5 years ago, my wife ran off with my brother the night before our wedding. At the reunion, she laughed and said, "Leaving you was the best thing I ever did." 5 minutes later, a pregnant woman entered, holding a 3-year-old girl. My ex dropped her glass. My brother looked like he'd seen a ghost. 5 years ago, my wife ran off with my brother the night before our wedding. At the reunion, she laughed and said, "Leaving you was the best thing I ever did." 5 minutes later, a pregnant woman entered, holding a 3-year-old girl. My ex dropped her glass. My brother looked like he'd seen a ghost. 5 years ago, I stood in an empty church lobby, holding a pair of gold wedding bands. My fiancée, Sarah, had vanished at midnight. My older brother, Daniel, stopped answering his phone 30 minutes later. They left behind a handwritten note on my kitchen counter. "Don't look for us. We belong together." I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I paid the caterers, cancelled the venue, and went to work on Monday morning. I spent the next 5 years letting everyone think I was the pathetic, broken brother who simply faded into the background. When my aunt organised our 5-year family reunion at an upscale private venue downtown, I knew they would be there. They'd spent half a decade living off family pity, painting me as the cold, emotionally unavailable fiancé who practically pushed them into each other's arms. I arrived, alone. I wore a plain grey suit and kept a low profile near the back bar, nursing a whiskey on the rocks. Sarah spotted me first. She walked over, wearing a sapphire dress that looked far too expensive for Daniel's unstable finance salary. Daniel followed close behind, puffing his chest out, wearing the smug smirk of a man who thought he had permanently won, like he finally crawled out of his cave. Sarah said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Daniel?" "Sarah," I replied, my voice completely flat. "I hope you've moved on, Michael," Daniel said, resting his hand possessively on Sarah's waist. "It's been 5 years. We just want peace." Sarah took a slow sip of her champagne, looked me dead in the eye, and laughed. "Honestly, Michael, leaving you was the best thing I ever did," she whispered loud enough for our nearby cousins to hear. "You were always so boring, so predictable. Daniel actually knows how to give a woman a life." I didn't blink. I took a measured sip of my drink, checked my watch, and looked toward the heavy double doors at the front of the venue. 5 minutes, I said quietly. "What?" Sarah frowned. "Nothing. I'm glad you're happy." Precisely 5 minutes later, the wooden door handles clicked open. A woman walked into the private room. She was visibly pregnant, wearing an elegant maternity jacket, holding the hand of a little girl with straight, dark hair. The room went dead silent. Sarah froze. The glass in her hand slipped through her fingers, shattering against the marble floor with a sharp, violent crack. Champagne splashed across her designer shoes. Daniel's face drained of every drop of blood. He backed up until his spine hit the edge of a cocktail table. He looked like he was staring at a ghost rising from an open grave. The woman's name was Rebecca. She had lived in a quiet suburb 2 towns over for the past 4 years. The 3-year-old girl holding her hand had Daniel's exact blue eyes and the distinctive dimple that ran in our family. Rebecca didn't look angry. She looked composed, precise, and entirely determined. "Daniel," Rebecca said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the silent room. "You blocked my number on Wednesday. You told me you were travelling for a client summit, but Michael was kind enough to tell me where you actually were." Sarah's head whipped toward Daniel. Her voice came out as a broken, strangled shriek. "Who the hell is this?" Daniel couldn't form words. His jaw trembled. His hands shook violently at his sides. Rebecca stepped closer, unzipping her purse and pulling out a folded legal document. She dropped it right onto the table beside Daniel. "I'm his wife of 3 years," Rebecca said smoothly, looking directly at Sarah. "And this is his daughter. And in 4 months, we're having our son." Sarah looked like she had been hit by a freight train. "You're what?" "Daniel, what is she talking about?" "You didn't know?" Rebecca asked, offering a soft, devastating smile. "Daniel told me he had an unstable, obsessive ex-girlfriend who stalked him after a messy breakup years ago. He said he kept you in a rented apartment in the city just to keep you quiet and out of trouble while he worked out of town." Sarah's knees buckled. She'd given up her family, her reputation, and her entire youth for a man who turned her into a hidden mistress while he built a suburban family with someone else. Daniel lunged toward me, grabbing my lapels. "You did this. You tracked her down." I didn't flinch. I slowly peeled his trembling fingers off my jacket, smoothing down the fabric with deliberate care. "I didn't track anyone down, Daniel," I whispered, leaning in so only he could hear. "Rebecca hired my firm 3 months ago. When she noticed your joint accounts were draining, I just handed her the audit. You destroyed yourself." I just gave her the address. I finished my whiskey, set the empty glass on the bar, and looked at Sarah one last time. "Like he said," I murmured, "leaving was the best thing you ever did." I walked out into the cool evening air, leaving the sound of their ruined lives echoing behind the heavy wooden doors.